everyone! So as promised today, I am here to talk more about the research that went into my novel, Wanderer Among Shadows. So I'm going to be talking today about the history of Andover and the Parker family during the Salem witch trials of 1692. So the story of the Parker family starts with two brothers, Joseph and Nathan. The two likely came over from England in the 1630s as indentured servants, and they originally settled in the town of Newbury, Massachusetts. The brothers would go on to be among the founding members of the town of Andover in the 1640s. Joseph was given freeman status in 1646 and Nathan in 1649, which likely just meant that they were free of their indenture and were able to become full members of the church at that point. Both would marry women named Mary, which will be important later on, and you'll see why. Nathan originally married a woman named Susanna Short, though, and had a son Nathan Jr. with her, but she died in 1651. So he likely married Mary Eyre within the next year. Mary Eyre was likely born in the 1630s in England. We're not too sure. We don't have birth records for her. However, we do know that she ended up settling in Haverhill, Massachusetts with her parents. So Nathan Parker and Mary Eyre ended up getting married probably around 1652, and the two had at least 9 children in this order: John, James, Mary, Hannah, Elizabeth, Robert, Joseph, Sarah, and Peter. Now I say at least 9 because there's actually 2 Marys listed as a daughter for the couple in the vital records. However, I don't know if it's because there was one Mary that was born and then died as a toddler, and then the next daughter they also named Mary, or if it's because one of these Marys is actually the daughter of Nathan's brother Joseph and was incorrectly listed as Nathan's daughter. Not too sure. Now, of their children, 3 of them do die before 1692. Mary Jr. dies, Robert dies in 1688, and then James actually dies in 1677, along with his cousin, when they were ambushed by Native Americans in Black Point in Maine. They'd actually gone there as part of the militia and were killed in battle. I did not mention Nathan Jr. in this story because he seems to have lived out his life in Newbury, and I don't know if he had any kind of relationship with his half-siblings or even knew them. I'm not too sure why he didn't stay with his father in Andover, but he did die by 1679. So it was quite a few years before the witch trials take place, so I just didn't bring him up in the story. Nathan Sr. dies in 1685. He did leave his family pretty well off. By the time he had died, they do have a decent amount of wealth that they receive in his will. He was able to build up his status over the years in the town of Andover. So next, I'm going to just give a little bit of background of the town of Andover. So Andover is to the northwest of Salem. It is today split between Andover and North Andover, but back in 1692, it was all one town. It was rather a large community. English settlers first started to move to Andover in the 1630s, and it was officially incorporated as a town in 1646. By the year 1692, the town actually had 2 ministers, the elder Reverend Francis Dane, who, because of his age, was only doing some of his duties. Not all of them, and then they also had a younger minister, Thomas Bernard, who had taken over the rest of the duties. So some people do believe that the 2 reverends actually had opposing factions during the Salem witch trials. Some think Francis Dane was the anti-witch trials faction, and then Bernard was the pro-witch trials faction. However, the evidence doesn't really bear this out. So now that we have that background on the Parker family and the town of Andover, let's get into what happened in 1692. So the year starts off relatively normally for Andover in 1692, but then in May, the first person from Andover is accused, a woman named Martha Carrier. Now, Martha was likely the first person accused because she already had a negative reputation in the town. A few years earlier, Martha had actually moved back to Andover, and she was blamed for the smallpox epidemic that had broken out in the town shortly after she had moved back. In total, that epidemic had caused 13 deaths in the town, and people did blame her for it. She was also known for cursing her neighbors, and she had married a man named Thomas Carrier, who was Welsh, and there was all sorts of legends that surrounded him, including the worst perhaps being that he served as the executioner of King Charles I. Don't know how much truth there is to any of the legends surrounding him, but her and her family did not have the best reputation in town, so it's probably not surprising that she was accused out of everybody else in Andover. Now, Martha Carrier may have been the only person in Andover accused of witchcraft that year, had it not been for a man named Joseph Ballard. Joseph Ballard's wife Elizabeth had actually become seriously ill in 1692, and he decided to ask two of the afflicted girls from Salem village to come to Andover to see if perhaps she was being bewitched. So after he does this, all hell proceeds to break loose in Andover. People are getting accused right, left, and center. And it's not just the afflicted girls and other people that take sick in Andover that are making the accusations, but the people that are accused themselves are accusing others, including even their own family members. And we do see that a lot of the accusations in Andover end up spreading through family line. So I think the accusations in Andover can be attributed to a few things. For one, there was a lot of old rumors and grudges in the town that kind of spread around, and people were being accused because of that. I also think it was because people were just trying to pass the buck off to somebody else. They probably had seen what happened in Salem and other towns and were frightened and didn't know what to do. So they just continued to accuse people that were already accused of witchcraft, as well as new people, even if it was their own family. There's also some evidence that torture was also used to coerce confessions out of people. For example, John Proctor does write a petition, and in this petition, he does state that Martha Carrier's two sons were actually tortured into confessing. So, who knows how many other people that was done to, and we just don't know about it. Could be one of the reasons why Andover had so many confessions.
Another cause may have been the heightened anxiety and trauma caused by the ongoing conflicts with the Native Americans. In fact, Billerica experienced a raid near the Andover border in August that left several civilians dead.
In the end, 45 people from Andover were accused of witchcraft, which is more than any other town, including Salem Village and Salem Town combined. So I think for me that's a little bit frustrating that Andover doesn't really get mentioned too much when we talk about the Salem witch trials. They do end up focusing on the people from Salem more, but Andover had even more people accused, and 3 of them did end up getting executed. So I think it would be nice in the future to have more of a discussion around Andover whenever the Salem witch trials is brought up. So where do the Parkers fit into this? Well, about a month and a half after Joseph Ballard brings the afflicted girls to Andover, Mary Parker is accused of witchcraft. She is actually brought to examination in Salem on September 2nd. And this appears to be the first time that she's ever gotten into legal trouble in her life. Now, there seems to be a few possible reasons for why she was accused. So, one reason that Jacqueline Kelly gives in her essay, The Untold Story of Mary Ira Parker, is that Mary was possibly confused with her sister-in-law. As I mentioned earlier, Joseph Parker did marry a woman named Mary, so there was actually 2 Mary Parkers of around the same age in Andover at this time. Now, Joseph's wife Mary actually did suffer from some sort of mental illness, so it is possible that this caused misgivings about her character in the town, and any misgivings were incorrectly attributed to Nathan's wife Mary. Mary Ira Parker even thought of this possibility herself as she brought up that there was another Mary Parker in Andover at her examination. Now, another reason for the possible suspicion against her can also be found through her accusers. She was accused by Martha Sprague, who was a member of the Tyler family, and by Hannah Bixby and Sarah Phelps, who were both members of the Chandler family. Decades before the Salem trials start, Thomas Chandler filed a lawsuit against the Tyler family when they tried to get one of their own out of their apprenticeship contract with him. Now, Nathan Parker had actually written up the apprenticeship contract and kept it in his house. When he and Mary weren't home one day, Moses Tyler broke into their house, stole the contract, and burned it. Nathan ended up testifying against the Tylers, and Chandler won the lawsuit. So it's possible that Martha Sprague, who was Moses Tyler's stepdaughter, had heard about the apprenticeship dispute decades earlier and decided to use that against Mary in 1692. But this does leave the question of why the Chandlers ended up accusing Mary, especially if the Parkers had taken their side all those decades earlier. I think a possible reason for this is that Mary's daughter Hannah actually marries John Tyler, so perhaps the Chandler family saw this as some sort of backstabbing, and that's why they turned against the Parkers in 1692. So this is where you want to pause if you don't want any more spoilers. I'll give you a second. Okay. So there's not a lot of court records that survive from Mary's case in 1692. And there's even less that survive from Sarah. Sarah Parker, Mary's youngest daughter, is also accused in that year, and the reasons for her are even harder to discern because we don't even have an examination record from her. I don't know if she was even examined. All I know is that she was imprisoned for a time in 1692. But basically what I had to go off of is the examinations of 3 other women who do bring her up. So one of the women that mentioned Sarah in her own examination is Susanna Post. Susanna Post is actually a stepdaughter of one of the Tylers, so again this may go back to the apprenticeship dispute and that might be why she brought Sarah up. However, both women are pretty far removed from their apprenticeship dispute, so it might just be that Susanna knew Sarah well and just didn't like her. And then another woman who does bring up Sarah in their examination is Rebecca Eames, who claimed that Sarah had been crossed in love and that the devil had come to her and kissed her. Now this statement is actually the one that I find the strangest because Rebecca Eames wasn't even from Andover, so I have no idea how well she even knew Sarah. And then another reason too I find it strange is that the statement does have some romantic undertones. So it kind of leads me to either question whether Eames was jealous of Sarah, who was much younger than herself, or perhaps Sarah was known to have a flirtatious character and Eames used this against her. And then the third person that does mention Sarah is Elizabeth Johnson Sr., who is actually the daughter of Francis Dane. I don't know the exact reasoning why she accused her. She doesn't really give many hints, but she does bring up Sarah's name. And unfortunately, this is all I have to go by for what happened to Sarah in 1692. Hopefully I'll get lucky, and in the future more records will be unearthed, but it seems unlikely. Now, one thing I did wonder is that maybe the accusations against Sarah had actually caused the accusations against her mother. The reason I think this is because the 3 women who mentioned Sarah had their examinations take place from August 19th to August 30th. And Mary's examination wasn't until September 2nd. So it's possible that Sarah was accused and arrested before her mother, and this then spurred suspicion on Mary in a form of guilt by association. Admittedly, I did not explore this possibility in the novel because it just didn't work with the timing of events that I want to go with, but it is an interesting possibility to explore. So that is the background information on Andover and the Parker family in the 1600s.
I do have to be honest, after researching them and writing about them so much, I really felt like the Parkers became my family in a strange way.
There's a lot more information on Andover and the Parkers that goes beyond the scope of this video. However, if you do want to explore this and find out more information, there's a very good book by Richard Hite called In the Shadow of Salem, The Andover Witch Hunt of 1692. I'll post the link to that below. He goes into a lot of depth about Andover's background and the different conflicts and family members, and just gives information about pretty much everyone involved, so I would highly recommend reading that. I'll also post the link to my blog post below, which also includes some of the other sources that I use to research all of this. Also, be sure to check out my other videos about Wander Among Shadows. The link to my novel is also posted below, and I'll see you in the next video.